Ohayou gozaimasu. So that incorporates a good morning and a good afternoon and good evening, everything in Japanese. Hat tip to Sumie, I don't have a hat on. Sumie, the illustrator of Botanical Shakespeare, which is back there somewhere. And then we breathe, because we're activating all the organs of the body and cleansing them, and we crush and sniff. Find an herb nearby. Sometimes dried herbs work as well. You can if you have a spice shelf or an herb shelf, you can get those, but you have to crush it a little bit to I feel bad crushing this leaf. This is my spearmint that I have grown, and I have all the, I keep saying it every week, but I have all these little sprouts coming up, and I'm so proud. And I have guests staying this weekend, and they were telling me that spearmint is a very hardy plant. So, but the other thing is, as we discussed last week with Hannah, the juiced up version just went up early this morning. It's a cooling plant. It's more cooling than peppermint. And because Shakespeare says mints in Winter's Tale, I figured any kind of mint goes. And we discussed all the different kinds last week anyway. But if you add an herb to your morning breathing, or your any time of day breathing ritual, it helps clear the brain fog and focus you. And it's good for so many systems of the body. We did discuss scents and kind of aromatherapy. It's been categorized in this kind of woo-woo area, or new age and all that stuff. But science, they're doing so many studies on the effects of certain smells on our physiological systems. So it's absolutely relevant to try it. Just try it. You will feel better. I come back and tell me if you don't. I would be surprised. And that's okay. Do I like being surprised? Yes, sometimes. But anyway, so today we could call this episode on catalytic converters and complications. And here's why. So I apparently have 4 catalytic converters in my car. And I always say, I don't need to know what a catalytic converter, I can't even pronounce it, catalytic converter. Anything you have trouble with, say it 3 times. I don't know really what it does, but I now know that if it doesn't work or it's broken, your car makes a very, very loud noise, and it's humiliating. And of course, I was going up to Connecticut yesterday to see what I realized was my first theater in 16 months or something like that. I did go see Blindness at the Shakespeare Theater in Washington D.C., but there are no actors in that. It's an audio and light show, sort of, and it's kind of like an audiobook on stage, if you will. But this was appropriately a Midsummer Night's Dream. So I'm wearing my little pansy that a friend gave me, which is thinking, pansy, pense in French, to think. But it's also the precious flower that Oberon has Puck squeeze on the eyelids of the lovers, which causes all kinds of confusion and then causes all kinds of happy endings, right? Okay, so what I was thinking about the catalytic converters in Shakespeare, there's 4 on mine, 2 are broken, they need repair. I've learned what they do and the problems when they don't work, but I don't need to become a mechanic to fix them. I go to an expert, and this is what I say about Shakespeare, is like you can come in at any point, and you can take what you need at any point. You may not always know what you need also, but you can find a way to make it run smoothly for you. And there's a lot of people who teach Shakespeare to kids early on and kind of kill it for them by doing trochee and spondy and feminine endings and all of this kind of stuff. But what you need to do is see a play. And what's even better is if you say a play, which is why we do the line of the week. Because not only is it a gentle introduction to Shakespeare, or a reminder if you already know it, but here's the thing about already knowing it. I've been studying it for Well, like I said, my first Shakespeare play was in 3rd grade, and I was just hooked. So many, 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 many years, to various degrees of intensity. And I can always learn more. That's what's so great about it. And if people tell you they're an expert, that's why experts have gotten a bad name, because experts, it feels like you're at the end of the line and you know everything. No one knows everything. And so there is always something more you can hear, always something more you can learn. That's why we do this show, Hannah and I, to anchor in wisdom and anchor in healing, because there's all kinds of healing in Shakespeare, as the plants, which nobody had really paid attention to before, as well as the philosophy and the rhythms and all of this stuff. So, I always say Shakespeare meets you where you are. And at the beginning of the show last night, I had my little purist genie on one shoulder, and I thought, oh, they missed that line, the meaning of that line, and oh dear. And I thought I was going to be in for a bad time. And I was completely wrong. It was delightful. It was so clever because they wove in like contemporary music, a lot of 80s music, which I loved. And ended with Under Pressure, which was perfect because we've all been under a lot of pressure. And it was just charming and clever. They had all different actors playing Puck, which I think for people who don't know the play might have been a little confusing, but it worked. So this was in Rowayton, Connecticut. Shakespeare on the Sound, I think it was called. I'm going to post it right after this. Not that, if you're anywhere in the neighborhood, but it was charming and lovely. And the poster's beautiful. And the t-shirts are lovely too. And I'm not flacking for them at all. I just, at the end, even though it's a comedy, I did start crying because it was the first time I'd been in real theater, not Zoom theater, not, a theater with no actors, not any of that. And the magic creeps over you. It just does. It's the physical exchange of energy, right? It's a catalytic converter. So there we go. So the line of the week has to be from Midsummer Night's Dream, and I really puzzled over this one, but here's what I'm going to say. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. Now, some people say whilst these visions did appear. And what's interesting about this is, there's often that caveat at the end of crazy movies or shows that say, oh, it was all a dream, and you feel kind of annoyed and cheated. But, Carl Jung says that all of our lives are just waking dreams, and that you should but you can interpret events in your life as if it was a dream, and figure out what your journey, little messages for your journey on our little span on earth. So, if we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, whilst these visions did appear. Or you can say while, it depends on the editor, again, who's the expert and who wants. They actually did have some weird pronunciations last night, and I think that a lot of people fall into that trap because Charlton Hinman, who did a survey of them and figured out all the compositors who put the little letters in for the first folio, those people make mistakes too, and he corrected them along the way, and they corrected them along the way, and so what ends up happening is sort of fascinating that all the first folios, a lot of the first folios are different. They'll have different word spellings for different things. And when we were putting Botanical Shakespeare together, one of the assistants said Thoroughbrook through Thoroughbriar, which a lot of people say, but it's not in all of them, so it's not Shakespeare being, cutesy. Anyway, so I think Hannah is on now. Yes, she is here. How are you?
I'm all right.
I was running her day.
Sat in front of a computer.
Oh no!
For a large part of it, but not all of it. But I launched my Edge of the Hedge podcast last week, so I was hoping to launch it on Monday, yep. And it ran. The editing and producing went a little bit over time, so it ended up being put out there on Tuesday. So done.
Oh, I can't wait to listen to it. So Hannah has started this new podcast called Edge of the Hedge.
It's on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, all of the normal podcast platforms.
And so that's going out, and just, are you actually walking around while you're doing the podcast? Wow, how does wind and weather affect all of that?
I have some very, very good wind muffs.
Okay. Everyone should have a wind muff. Anyway, okay, so we're talking about, first let's talk about the Midsummer Night's Dream plant. Now, I tend to be a stickler and not to discuss plants that aren't in Shakespeare, but Midsummer's Day, the 24th, is also St. John's Day. And of course, St. Johnswort is named for St. John's Day. So it is the plant of Midsummer's Day. It's not in Shakespeare specifically, but you know, I'm kind of liberal with my boundaries, maybe too liberal. Anyway, okay, there it is, and it's lovely, and it does all kinds of things. Like, Hannah, over to you.
Oh, crikey, where to start? So it's got a bit of a weird reputation, St. Johnswort. So it's far too close. So it's called, it's Hypericum in Latin, so Hypericum perforatum, which basically means perforate St. Johnswort. And because you're probably not going to be able to see from here, but it's got tiny little, what looks like tiny little holes through all of the leaves. So if you hold it up to the light, you can kind of see these like little sort of pinpricks like coming through it. And it's almost coming into flower, just sort of at the edge of those, well, the tip of those stalks there. In a couple of days, there'll be some beautiful 5-petaled yellow flowers with really pointy yellow stamens. But oh my word, its uses. So most people know St. Johnswort because of its very sort of well-known use as
depression, right?
Antidepressant.
Antidepressant, right?
So yes, it is good for that. But that's kind of falling into that thing of thinking of herbs in a Western biomedical way. Okay. So yes, it has an action, a really, really good action for seasonal affective disorder. So sad.
Oh, great.
Which you kind of get because, you know, it's a sunny, bright herb. But then herbalists use it for mild to moderate depression, but in combination with other plants that are going to augment it. We we don't really use it on its own, although that's what it's marketed as by the manufacturers of various supplements. So it's a bright, it's a sunny herb, and it's lovely for that. But then there's this whole other use about it for burns.
Burns. Okay.
So when this starts to flower, when the flowering tops are picked and then infused in oil, what happens is it's a bit like a sort of one of those magic chemistry experiments that the pigment comes out of it and your oil turns, I should have got some out of the cupboard actually, turns bright red.
Oh wow, like quince does.
So it's brilliant. So, and it's the hypericin in the plant that does that. And what that infused oil does is that when it's rubbed on the skin, it's very, very soothing and healing for the physical nerves. So damaged nerve tissue, so things like sciatica, shingles, things like that.
Oh wow! I have several friends who've gotten shingles during COVID.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty stuff. It's very painful. And then you can use it for sunburn as well.
Oh, great. Well, and
that's talking about rubbing it on the skin.
That leads us right into aloe, actually.
Which
is also used for sunburn.
Oh, actually, I should just say one thing about hypericum before I forget. Sorry. It does actually, curiously, when you take hypericum internally, it can increase photosensitivity. So it can make your skin burn if you expose it to sunlight. But also, you've got to be very careful with St. Johnswort and not take it with any prescription medication that you might be taking. That's the really, really important one.
Okay. Well, and that's actually why we juice up these segments, these live segments, with all this information on the side, so you can stop the video and look at all of the things that it does and doesn't do and should do and shouldn't do and all of that kind of stuff. So that's why we do that. Okay. Wow. Okay, again, not exactly in Shakespeare, but in Shakespeare by reference. So, okay. So, and then, so leading into aloe, aloe is not often included in the list of Shakespeare's plants, the few that there are, because it's not in any of the plays, and it's in a remote poem people don't often consider, called The Lover's Complaint. And the line is, I should use the book. But anyway, and sweetens in the suffering pangs it bears the aloes of all forces, shocks, and fears, which is an interesting line. It's like soothing. It's like the unguent aspect of all of the shocks and fears. It's not used. It's used in a metaphorical sense, obviously, but it's the only place where it's used that way. And you would think in a way it would be used more often. So, how is it most often used?
Oh, well, for burns, as you said, yeah. It's just, yeah, that's it. It's stunning. So the bit that's used are the kind of the inner leaves, because it's one of the few succulents that we use in herbal medicine.
Does it grow in England?
Just grow it in a pot in your house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got a big one on my windowsill that I tried to move to bring here in front of the camera, and it started to wobble, and I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it where it is.
But see, that's probably why it's not mentioned that often, is because it wasn't a native plant that was just all around. So, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, aloe is something that everybody should have on their kitchen windowsill, because it's just a fantastic first aid plant. And if you need to use it, you just slice off one of the leaves from the outside, not too big a one, but slice off one of the leaves from the outside just at the bottom. And then you can either squeeze out the gel from the centre of the leaf, or split the leaf open with a knife and scrape out the gel. And it's that gel that is really very, very cooling and very soothing, but also very healing for kitchen burns, the sunburn. And what it does basically is, it's as well as really cooling the area down, it stops so much of a scar from forming.
It stops a scar from forming? Wow.
So much. So it's just good stuff.
And what about, there's a lot of aloe drinks you can buy in stores. So is it's like, I don't know, oiling up your insides or something for digestion?
Well, it's kind of going back to that term that we've used a few times on these shows, the demulcent. Sorry, hello, my cat. It's demulcent, so it's soothing and it's cooling, and so with those drinks that are available in shops, and this is, it's a really, really, providing they're not too full of rubbish. What usually happens with those is it's the gel that's mixed with water, basically, and then there's going to have to be some preservative put in it to stop it going off. But what it does is it soothes and it cools the digestive tract. So in that way, some people who have acid reflux can find it very helpful. People who have kind of very, very agitated sort of digestive problems, and it just basically helps to soothe and to cool. It's the simplest way of putting it, really, without getting too technical.
So can you scrape off the stuff in the leaves? It's funny to call those big chunky things leaves, though, to me, but can you scrape it off and put it in a drink yourself without having to buy, because those aloe drinks that you buy are rather expensive, and as you say, there's hopefully no rubbish in them, or very little. But if you make it yourself, you can make sure there's no rubbish. So, so what would you do? Just put it in water or mint tea for an extra cooling effect?
Well, you could do, yeah. I mean, as long as you were just getting the gel and none of the none of the actual sort of main leaf matter in, it should be quite well tolerated. So, but you only need a small amount, really, to get a good effect.
Okay, so So that is, and sweetens in the suffering pangs it bears, the aloes of all forces, shocks, and fears. Maybe you can have 2 lines of the week if you want. It's up to you how much you want to sharpen your brain. Just 2 or 3 lines gets those synapses firing and saves you loads of money on those memory supplements. So this is our last. We have gotten through June. We are halfway through 2021. Can you believe? And, right. Next Sunday, I am flying to London. So I might be able to do this before I leave for the airport, or maybe I'll do it from the airport. That'd be weird. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll play it by ear. But anyway, stay cool. Learn a line. Go see theater. Get some aloe. You can keep it on your windowsill. Thank you, Hannah, so much. And listen to Edge of the Hedge after she puts it in the link tree. And we will hopefully see you next week from somewhere. Bye.
Bye.